The instant my daughter-in-law struck the ground, the champagne glass slipped from her grasp. Helen, the mother of Jessica, was convulsing on the marble kitchen floor, with froth accumulating at the corners of her mouth. My only thought was, that was not supposed to happen to her, right? Be sure to subscribe and inform me of your location if you are currently viewing this. Before I proceed to explain how I arrived at this stage, I would like to clarify one matter. Despite my 70 years on this planet, I did not endure a ruthless business world by being foolish. If an individual attempts to poison you at your own retirement celebration, you are aware, even more so when that individual has been gazing at your bank account with the same intensity as a famished woman observes a feast. Just 2 hours prior, my kitchen was alive with joy and celebration. For $23 million, I had recently sold my consulting firm. It is not terrible for a company that I built from the ground up after my husband's death 15 years ago. This celebration was the result of Michael, my son, his insistence. Those sincere brown irises of his, which were working overtime, had said, "Mom, you deserve to celebrate. Please allow Jessica to manage all matters. Allow yourself to unwind and relish the experience." It should have been apparent to me that there was an issue when Jessica offered to serve as the hostess. Suddenly, the woman who typically complained about loading the dishwasher was transformed into the embodiment of Martha Stewart, meticulously arranging flowers and polishing crystal as if her life depended on it. In the end, it is likely that it did. Her soiree was delightful. I will concede that. At least 30 individuals from my professional life, a few acquaintances and family members. Even Jessica had employed a waitress. "Nothing is too wonderful for you, Sarah," she exclaimed, tightly grasping my arm with those meticulously manicured nails that exceed the average person's weekly grocery bill. My erstwhile business associate and I were engaging in casual conversation when I saw it. Standing in close proximity to the champagne table, Jessica warily glances around before extracting a small vial from her purse. My blood turned to ice as I observed her empty the contents into a particular glass, the one with the small fracture on the rim that I consistently used at gatherings. At this point, a rational individual could have reacted by screaming, contacting the authorities, or confronting her in person. Nevertheless, I have come to understand that sometimes the most effective method of capturing a serpent is to deceive it into believing it has cornered a rodent. So, I continued to observe, nodded in agreement with my business partner's commentary on market trends, and smiled. Jessica began to approach me, her countenance imbued with a guise of daughterly concern as she picked up my doctored champagne. She offered me the glass, saying, "Sarah, you appear fatigued. Here, you may enjoy a glass of champagne. You have certainly earned it." I accepted the glass, expressed my gratitude to her cordially, and remained in line. About 10 minutes later, while she was preoccupied with displaying her new tennis bracelet to the neighbors, I discreetly exchanged glasses with her mother, Helen, who was standing nearby and appeared somewhat dazed in the absence of a beverage. Helen had consistently been somewhat disorganized. It is a poor creature. The glass that I had just placed next to her purse, the nearest one, she seized without hesitation. I was asked if I had ordered the champagne from a special place, and she complimented its intriguing flavor within 5 minutes. As they say, the rest transpired rather rapidly. Helen and I both kneeled beside each other as Jessica cried out for someone to call 911. She delivered an almost convincing portrayal of stunned devastation. Almost. The challenge of being an assassin is that genuine panic and false panic are distinctly different when one is aware of the signs. What occurred? "My son!" Michael demanded, pressing through the small throng that had assembled. His visage was pallid. However, I observed an additional characteristic in his demeanor, an abrupt look at Jessica that was only slightly too prolonged. "I have no idea." Jessica sobbed while holding my arm. Suddenly, she collapsed. She appeared to be in perfect health until the very next moment. She gestured helplessly at her mother, who was now unconscious but were still breathing. Thank God. The paramedics arrived in a matter of minutes. As they loaded Helen onto a stretcher, I found myself observing my son's expression. After 32 years of parenthood, I had acquired the ability to interpret his moods in a manner similar to that of weather patterns. At the moment, He appeared to be a man who was observing his meticulously devised strategies unravel in real time. "In which hospital?" It was I who inquired with the chief paramedic. "St. Mary's." "Are you related to us?" "A close friend," I said, casting a thoughtful glance at Jessica, who was preoccupied with hyperventilating and failed to react. "Following in my automobile, I shall oblige." Michael swiftly advanced. "No, Mother. You are not required to perform that action. We shall manage all matters. You ought to remain in this position. Clean up the aftermath of the celebration." How considerate. "Leave the target at home while they investigate the malfunction of their modest scheme." "Nonsense," I asserted with conviction. "Helen is practically my family. My arrival is imminent." Prior to any argument, I snatched my keys and purse. While at the hospital, I ensured that I was as near as possible to the medical personnel in order to listen in on their conversations. The diagnosis for Helen was acute poisoning, with an unknown cause. The doctor's discussion with the nurse regarding plant alkaloids was sufficiently detailed to suggest that someone had conducted research on untraceable toxins. Jessica, her designer heels clicking against the linoleum like a metronome counting down her apprehension, strode the waiting room. Michael remained seated in a plastic chair, his phone perpetually vibrating with messages that he appeared to be hesitant to respond to. Jessica stated, "This is truly appalling. For the 5th time. Unfortunate mother. It is beyond my comprehension how this came to pass." Sympathetically, I touched her shoulder. "Dear, these things are frequently the subject of mystery. No doubt the physicians will resolve the matter." I then added, almost casually, "You know, it's fortunate that she didn't consume a significant amount of said champagne. Before her collapse, she had consumed only a few swallows." Jessica appeared to stumble almost imperceptibly. "How about champagne? Is it your belief that the champagne is the source of this?" I dismissively waved my hand. "Oh, I'm certain it's nothing. Just the psyche of an elderly woman seeking patterns in the absence of any." Jessica's complexion had paled slightly, and her hands were slightly quivering as she reached for her coffee. Michael had the same intensity as a hawk examining field rodents as he observed our conversation. A doctor emerged 3 hours later to inform us that Helen was stable, but she would need to remain overnight for medical observation. According to him, the tests were equivocal. However, the substance she had consumed was gradually passing through her system. "Are we permitted to observe her?" A question was posed by Jessica. "She is under sedation and is only available to her family. Tomorrow is the most advantageous time to return." I was escorted to my vehicle by Michael as we exited the hospital. "Mom, perhaps you should consider staying with us tonight, won't you? Following the events that transpired, I would experience a greater sense of relief if you were not alone. I am impressed by your thoughtfulness." This is particularly true given that Helen's minor medical emergency had likely left them pondering whether I had any suspicions. The response was affirmative. I completely did. However, they were not yet required to be informed of this information. "Dear, that is very kind of you. However, I will be just fine. Remember the new security system I possess?" I kissed his cheek and entered my vehicle, observing what appeared to be an urgent, murmured conversation between him and Jessica in the parking lot through my rearview mirror. I returned home and relaxed in my study, after pouring myself a genuine goblet of champagne from a new bottle. The time had come to ascertain the precise nature of the plans my devoted family had for me, and, more significantly, to determine my response. After 45 years of business experience, I devoted the evening to a task that I had developed a high level of proficiency in: research. This is not the type of work that deals with databases and computing, the type of activity that is performed with a curious mind and a clear memory. Helen was not poisoned at random, and it was absolutely not an accident. A person had intended to murder me at my own celebration, likely in the hopes of feigning a heart attack or stroke. At the age of 70, they occur. No one challenges the heartbreak that a successful woman experiences as a result of the tension of selling her life's work. However, why? Don't you think that was the $23 million question? I prepared coffee at 5 a.m. and sat at my kitchen table with a legal pad, documenting all of the information I had regarding Michael and Jessica's financial situation. No, it was not visually appealing. Michael's architectural firm had been experiencing financial difficulties since the recession, and Jessica's boutique jewelry business was more of a pastime than a source of revenue. They enjoyed an elevated standard of living. They are compensated excessively for their genuine earnings. 3 times the amount they could reasonably afford was the mortgage on the absurdly priced house in Westfield. The BMW and Mercedes currently situated in their driveway were not compensated. A minor country's education budget could be funded solely by Jessica's purchasing habits. Of course, I would be willing to assist them. And what mother would not? There were a few thousand scattered throughout the months when Michael mentioned that they were in a difficult spot. When Jessica wept over her desire to establish a family in the appropriate community, the down payment on the house was made. Private school tuition was required for Emma when they maintained that public institutions were inadequate. After reviewing my checkbook records, I discovered that I had contributed nearly $200,000 to them over the past 5 years. I referred to them as gifts. Their satisfaction is the focus of our investments. Loans are never to be made. This would have been unbecoming. But now I was contemplating whether they had perceived those gifts differently. Less akin to maternal generosity and more akin to advance payments on an inheritance they were eager to receive. 7:30 was the time when the telephone called. Calling to inquire about my well-being, Jessica. She voiced her concern. Sarah, I was unable to sleep all night because I couldn't stop thinking about you. After the incident that occurred with my mother, I am concerned that there may have been an issue with the food or beverages. Did you not experience any symptoms of illness? How considerate of her to verify that her poison had located its intended target. Not at all, my darling. My health is satisfactory. Regarding Helen, have you received any additional information? She should be able to return home today, according to the physicians. Before the celebration, they suspect that she may have consumed an item that did not concur with her. You are familiar with her reaction to her medications. Most likely, she consumed an item on an empty stomach. Helen Peterson possessed a multitude of attributes. However, neglecting medication use was not one of them. Like a military operation, the woman organized her medications with labeled containers and smartphone reminders. That is such a relief, I exclaimed. I was concerned that it could have been a matter at the party. Would that have been a catastrophe? Certainly not. Certainly not, Jessica replied with a swiftness. No, the physicians were unequivocal. It was not food poisoning. It was simply one of those occurrences. I find it intriguing that she was so eager to halt any inquiry into the events that transpired at my residence, as if she was concerned that someone might attempt to test the remaining champagne. I proceeded to my kitchen and observed the bottle that Jessica had opened for the party, which was still 3/4 full and placed naively on my counter. I hung up. I found myself contemplating the potential consequences of having it examined at a laboratory. No, I did not require evidence for my own sake. What I had observed was well known to me. On the other hand, evidence may prove advantageous in the future. My doorbell chimed at 9 o'clock. Holding a box of pastries from my preferred patisserie, Michael stood on my front veranda, exuding the same level of concern as my son. I thought you might want some brunch, he said, kissing my forehead. You likely did not consume a substantial amount of food yesterday as a result of the events that transpired. I permit him entry and prepare fresh coffee while he arranges the pastries on a plate. I experienced an unusual sense of melancholy as I observed him navigate my kitchen, reaching for sugar without inquiring where it was stored, and opening cupboards that he had been familiar with since boyhood. Still, this was my young son, the one who would bring me dandelions and boldly exhibit his elementary school artwork on my refrigerator. What was the moment when that child transformed into a man who stood by as his wife attempted to assassinate his mother? My mother, how are you doing? Settling across from me at the breakfast table, he inquired. I recognize you. These ancient bones require more than a hint of exhilaration to be jolted. Although he smiled, it did not extend to his irises. It was this that I was apprehensive about. This is an unusual statement. As I waited, I savored my coffee. In fact, Michael continued, nibbling at a Danish, a conversation has been held between Jessica and me on the subject of your circumstances. My circumstance? My mother? You are 70 years old. Being alone in this expansive residence, with the proceeds from the sale, vaguely, he gestured. I find it to be an overwhelming amount of responsibility for a single individual to handle. There it was. They were preparing for their subsequent actions. Keeping my tone light, I expressed my gratitude for your concern, my beloved. I have been able to manage the situation quite well thus far. Michael leaned forward, his expression earnest. Haven't you, however? In other words, what about Helen's tragedy yesterday? What would have happened if that had been you? What if you had collapsed? Did no one locate you for hours? The level of courage was mind-blowing. He employed their unsuccessful assassination attempt as an argument for why I required their protection. My name is Michael. With 30 witnesses present, Helen collapsed at a party, and paramedics arrived within minutes. That is not a cautionary tale regarding living alone, as far as I am concerned. No, that is not my intention. He ran his hands through his locks. I recall a gesture from his adolescent years, when he was about to request something that he was aware I would decline. Look, some research has been conducted by Jessica and me. There are numerous communities that are particularly appealing to seniors who are active. Sites that would be populated, have activities, and have medical personnel on site. Ah, I see. Pitch for geriatric homes. I found it quite advantageous that they had already conducted investigation on my behalf. How thoughtful, I exclaimed. I assume you have identified a particular item in your mind. Actually, absolutely. The individual produced his smartphone and presented me with a website that was visually appealing. Sunset Manor. It is situated only 20 minutes from our residence, which allows us to visit it at any time. They offer a retreat, cultural activities, and a golf course. It is closer to a resort than a retirement residence. I examined photographs of elderly individuals who were beaming and engaged in water, aerobics, and bridge. Everyone appeared to be in a state of tranquility and well-being, probably due to the fact that they were severely medicated. However, Michael continued, there is typically a waiting list. However, in order to expedite the process of moving in, someone would be required to pay the entire entrance charge up front. It is substantial, approximately $400,000, but it encompasses all elements: medical care, housing, and sustenance for the duration of one's existence. $400,000. That would certainly reduce my liquid assets, wouldn't it? Once I was securely ensconced in Sunset Manor, who would be granted power of attorney over the remaining $22 million? What individuals would be responsible for making decisions regarding my financial and medical well-being? I stated. It sounds appealing, but I am quite content here. There are numerous recollections of your father associated with this residence. His mother and father have been absent for 15 years. Isn't it time to begin a new chapter? My heart was aching as a result of the compassionate concern in his voice. Perhaps I would have entertained his proposal had I not witnessed the events of the previous evening. My son, who was extremely concerned about his aging mother, was determined to ensure her safety and well-being. This would have been a poignant moment. On the contrary, it was downright frightful, I eventually said. I will consider it. Making this decision is significant. Visible was Michael's relief, of course. Allow yourself the necessary time. Possibly, we could make the trip to that location next week, solely for the purpose of perusing? Could be. Standing up, I initiated the process of removing the breakfast dishes. I suppose I ought to contact Helen today. Ensure that she is experiencing an improvement in her symptoms. Actually, Jessica requested that I inform you that Helen may require a few days of recuperation, Mother. The physician stated that visitors may be overly stimulating during her recuperation. How very practical. Please ensure that I remain separate from the victim until the evidence has been eliminated from her system and she is unable to recall specifics with clarity. After Michael's departure, I sat in my study and contemplated the coincidence. I had sold the company, and they had delayed their actions until afterward. Intelligent. My $23 million would have been distributed to Michael in accordance with my will, even if I had passed away 6 months prior. However, as a gift from a living individual, it would be subject to significantly different tax consequences. In the event that they were able to feign signs of deteriorating mental capacity prior to my death, they would have a basis to contest any recent modifications to my estate plans. The phone sounded. My counsel, David Hartwell, returning a contact that I had previously initiated. Sarah, I am pleased to hear from you. How is the retirement party going? Eventful, I mentioned. David, I must see you. In the near future. Is all in order? 20 years ago, my spouse established a garden that I observed from the window of my study. The roses were in full blossom, despite the fact that they were neglected by all but an elderly woman who appeared to be incapable of overseeing her own affairs. I expressed my uncertainty, but I believe I am on the brink of discovering the truth. David Hartwell had served as my attorney for 2 decades, during which time he had witnessed my husband's passing, the establishment of my business, and every significant decision that was made thereafter. David, a slender, precise man who maintained his emotions under strict control, was the type of attorney you would seek when you suspected that your family was attempting to murder you. Dark wood and leather chairs were employed to create an atmosphere of confidence in his office, which was situated on the 15th floor and provided a view of downtown. I had always felt secure in this location, as it was characterized by the subtle aroma of costly fragrance and law books. After David's aide brought us coffee and closed the door, he said, "Tell me everything," I informed him. "The party's every detail, the collapse of Helen. This morning, Michael is scheduled to visit." From time to time, David took notes on his legal pad while listening without interruption. And when I had concluded, he inquired, "Are you certain about what you observed?" "This chair is as certain as I am that I am seated in it," David reclined as he tapped his pen against his lips. "Proof of intent is the issue. Jessica may argue that she was incorporating a personal element, a supplement, a flavoring, or something innocuous into the champagne. In the absence of testing the residual champagne, there is no evidence of attempted homicide. Therefore, we should evaluate it. If we discover poison, we have evidence that she endeavored to murder an individual. However, we have yet to establish that she had the specific intention of killing you. She could argue that she was attempting to claim insurance funds for her own mother or that the funds were intended for someone else. I had neglected to contemplate that perspective. Does this mean that they could avoid a murder charge, even if they had evidence of poisoning? Attempted assassination, indeed. However, there is an additional matter that we should address, Sarah." The expression of David became increasingly grave. "First, they may attempt alternative methods if they are prepared to murder you in exchange for your money. Legal challenges to your competence, for example. On what basis? Age. What is your age? Do you reside alone? Question. What is the tension associated with selling your business? Upon establishing a pattern of declining mental capacity or judgment, they may petition for guardianship. As soon as they have control over your person, they also have control over your assets. All of a sudden, the nursing home recommendation became more logical. Obtain my isolation and surround me with medical professionals who may be willing to document signs of dementia or perplexity, particularly if those professionals were receiving a substantial salary for their observations. Is there anything I should do?" David retrieved a thick document by opening a file compartment. "At first, we record your present mental state. I shall coordinate for you to undergo an evaluation by a geriatric psychiatrist, an individual who is proficient in conducting competency assessments for elderly clients. Make sure to document that immediately. Then what? Then, we employ innovative estate planning strategies." The smile of David was acute. "Let's ensure that Michael and Jessica adhere to your regulations if they wish to engage in activities with your money." Our subsequent 2 hours were dedicated to reviewing alternatives, structures of trust that would render it exceedingly challenging for any individual to contest my decisions, specific medical directives that delineated the individuals who were permitted and prohibited from making healthcare decisions on my behalf, financial agreements that would initiate automatic audits in the event that an individual attempted to access my accounts without the appropriate authorization. "There is one more thing," David stated as I prepared to depart. "Your personal safety should be a priority, given the information you provided me with last night. Once they have attempted, they are likely to attempt it again, albeit with greater caution. Last evening, I contemplated Michael's recommendation that I join them for the night. How practical that would have been. A grieving widow, who is distraught over the abrupt illness of a friend, may be consuming a sedative to aid in her slumber. It is simple for an elderly woman to inadvertently consume an excessive number of medications. What do you suggest? For beginnings, a crisis button system, motion sensors, and security cameras. A business that specializes in safeguarding high net worth individuals is one that I can suggest. High net worth individuals. That is what I am now, it seems. Money that is sufficient to justify murder. I found myself examining each vehicle in my rearview mirror as I drove home, uncertain as to whether I was being pursued. Insomnia. Possibly. However, my spouse would often remind me that you are not paranoid if they are truly after you. I was pulling into my garage when my phone rang. Jess. Her voice was brimming with artificial joy. Hi, Sarah. I wanted to inform you that my mother has returned home from the hospital. She has experienced a significant improvement in her health, although she is unable to recall much of the events of the previous evening. That is typical for this type of incident, the physician stated. Perfectly practical. I'm overjoyed that she is unharmed. I would be delighted to come and visit her tomorrow. Oh, she is truly not yet prepared to receive visitors. In a few days, perhaps? Yes, I will inform you. Of sure, my darling. Just inform her that I am thinking of her. Upon concluding the conversation, I remained in my vehicle for an extended period of time, gazing at the residence that I had occupied for 30 years. Michael, who was 10 years old at the time, had been dreaming of family dinners and holiday gatherings when my husband and I acquired it. But we were youthful and optimistic, and we were confident that everything would work out, even though the mortgage was a reach at the time. This moment was reminiscent of a citadel that was being besieged. However, having been in business for an extended period, I had come to the realization that the most effective defense is often a well-run offense. The time has come to demonstrate to my family the true capabilities of a 70-year-old woman. At 8 the following morning, 3 technicians in unmarked vehicles arrived from the security company. They spent the day installing cameras, motion detectors, and a panic button system that could summon officers in under 3 minutes. I admitted to my neighbors that I had been experiencing issues with parcel thievery, which is a plausible narrative in any suburban neighborhood. My home was more adequately safeguarded than the majority of jewelry stores by the afternoon. However, David's messenger's envelope delivered at 2 o'clock was the source of genuine security. The following documents have been duly witnessed and notarized: my updated will, trust documents, and medical directives. If Michael and Jessica desired my money, they would be required to wait for it, and the amount they received was significantly less than their expectations. The new will reduced Michael's inheritance from its entirety to a modest trust fund that would provide him with $50,000 annually for the duration of his life. This amount is sufficient to support his current standard of living, but it is insufficient to pay for their current lifestyle. I would allocate the majority of my estate to cancer research, with lesser amounts allocated to several charities that I had long supported. Jessica received nothing, not a single cent. The woman was never my favorite, but I had endured her for Michael's sake. However, the line was drawn for me at attempted homicide. Just as I was concluding my review of the documents, my doorbell rang. I could observe Michael and Jessica standing on my front veranda, both of whom appeared somewhat somber through the security monitor. I opened the door, and Michael said, "Mom, we need to talk." "Of course, my dear. Please enter." They made their home in my living room. It appeared as though Jessica was poised on the edge of the settee, anticipating the possibility of having to take off at any moment. Michael's attention persisted on the newly installed security camera in the corner as he surveyed the room. "A new camera?" he inquired. "Package theft," I stated as casually as possible. These days, it is impossible to be excessively cautious. Her airway was cleared by Jessica. "Sarah, we have been contemplating the incident that occurred just the other night, which involved Mom's accident. Yes? The reason is that we are deeply embarrassed about hosting the event in this location. If any of the items we brought caused her to become ill," she digressed, wiping her eyes with a tissue. With professional respect, I observed this performance. Clearly, Jessica had been engaging in practice. "My beloved, I am confident that it was not anything you brought. Still, what if it were?" Leaning forward, Michael, "Could there be an issue with the champagne, the cuisine, or my mother? I would never be able to forgive myself if we had inadvertently endangered you." Here it arrived, the preparation for their subsequent actions. Jessica stated that we believe it would be more beneficial to provide you with care for a period of time until we are convinced that you are secure. Undertook my responsibility in what manner? Well, Michael suggested that you reside with us, simply for the time being, until we can determine the circumstances of the previous evening. While observing their expressions, I permitted the silence to extend. Michael's expression was one of genuine concern. He had consistently succeeded in convincing himself that his motivations were purely pure. Jessica appeared to be a woman who was behind on her mortgage payment. "That is extremely thoughtful," I finally exclaimed. "Even so, I am entirely secure in this location. Are you, however?" Jessica's tone assumed a harshness. "Sarah, you are at least 70 years old and living independently. What happens if an incident occurs and you aren't located for several days?" Identical to Michael's thesis from yesterday, they were operating according to a script. Michael continued, "What if you experience a heart attack or a fall? Dear mother, at your age, anything is possible. When I was my age, as if having reached 70 meant that I had already passed away and had simply not yet realized it. I must admit, you are entirely correct. I stated this with consideration. I am at an age where anything could occur. My will was updated that day precisely for this reason." The room's temperature decreased by approximately 10 degrees. "Your will?" Jessica maintained a rigorously neutral tone of voice. "Yes, of course. It is astonishing how these matters are brought to the forefront of one's mind by a mere encounter with mortality, even another's. I quickly came to the realization that my previous will was significantly outdated. The color of Michael's visage had become paler. "What type of developments are you referring to?" I directed my gaze toward him. This was the same smile that I had employed when he was 8 years old, and I had caught him in the act of lying about shattering my beloved vase. "Sure, I'll make a few minor changes to align with my current priorities. You are familiar with the manner in which these matters unfold." The subsequent silence was deafening. I could almost hear their minds rushing as they attempted to ascertain the extent to which their plans had been seriously disrupted. "In conclusion," Jessica stated, her voice strained, "I am confident that your decision was positive." "Dear, I concur." After a brief period, they departed, promising to return to check on me in the near future. From my security monitor, I observed them sit in their vehicle in my driveway for a period of 10 minutes, engaging in a conversation that appeared to be quite intense. A telephone conversation was subsequently made by Jessica. Although I was unable to hear her words, I could observe her angry gesturing. Michael consistently attempted to remove the phone from her, but she consistently pushed his palm aside. I poured myself a glass of wine and sat in my preferred chair after they finally drove away. I intend to execute the second phase of my strategy tomorrow. However, I was hoping to relish the first tranquil evening in days this evening. In the end, there is a profound sense of satisfaction in witnessing your adversaries discover that they have misjudged you. The game had only recently begun, and I had been playing it for a significantly longer period of time than they had. I received an unexpected visitor the following morning. On my doorstep, Helen Peterson stood, holding a small purse like a lifeline, appearing pale but resolute. "I must speak with you, Sarah," she stated without preamble. That was the other night. She was invited in, and I prepared tea while examining her face for indications of poisoning. Although she appeared fatigued, she appeared alert and certainly more cogent than her daughter would have liked me to believe. Helen sat in my living room chair, stating that Jessica had informed her that I had experienced an adverse reaction to my medication. "I have not taken any medications, Sarah, with the exception of supplements, for years." "Interesting. What do you recall about the party?" "Everything, in fact, until I began to experience dizziness. In my memory, the champagne had an unusual, acrid, and almost metallic flavor, and I recall seeing Jessica earlier near the beverages table, engaged in an activity with a small bottle. The rapidity of my pulse increased." "Kind of bottle?" "The type of container that is commonly used for essential oils or other items is similar to an eyedropper." When Helen placed her teacup down, her hands trembled slightly. "Hi, Sarah. I believe my daughter may have attempted to poison you." "Why would you believe that?" Helen's laugh was bitter. "Why? Because she has been discussing your finances for months. How inequitable it is that you possess so much while they are forced to endure hardship." Imagine how much simpler their lives would be if something were to happen to you. Pieces were gradually aligning. Has she made any specific comment? I was asked by her last month whether I believed you had recently amended your will. Michael's inheritance appeared to be a matter of great concern to her. My gaze were met by Helen. I believe that they have been making preparations for this for an extended period of time, Sarah. I took a decision. Helen had a right to be informed about her daughter's endeavors. In addition, I required an ally who had personally observed their conduct. Dear Helen, I observed Jessica place an object in my champagne glass. I deliberately swapped our beverages. Her visage lost its hue. She made an attempt to murder you. I nearly lost my life in the process. Certainly, yes. For a brief period, we were in silence, contemplating the enormity of the event. So, what are you planning to do? At last, Helen inquired. I will provide them with precisely what they desire, I declared. It is simply not in the manner they anticipate attaining it. Helen raised an eyebrow. Just what does that entail? The implication is that your daughter and my son are about to discover that certain activities have higher consequences than they initially believed. Following Helen's departure, I contacted a former business associate via telephone. A private investigation firm that specialized in corporate espionage and background checks was operated by Patricia Williams. Over the years, we had collaborated on numerous occasions when I required information regarding potential business associates. I am Sarah Wilson. Through the telephone, Patricia's voice was pleasantly inviting. Your sale was brought to my attention. Congratulations. Thank you. Hi, Patricia. I require your assistance. A personal one. Kind of favor? I must have access to all of my son's financial information. Credit cards, bank accounts, loans, and investments. Every single thing. Then, there was a lull. Dear Sarah, are you certain? At times, family information can be unpleasant. I am confident. Give me 48 hours. Although Patricia was conducting her wizardry, I executed the subsequent phase of my strategy. Michael and I arranged to meet for lunch at our previous restaurant, where we had celebrated his graduation from architecture school, his nuptials, and Emma's birth. When he arrived, he was visibly anxious and was frequently checking his phone. Your mother, how are you doing? It was evident that you were distressed during your telephone conversation. My safety and future planning have been on my mind, as well as the statements you and Jessica made. The expression on his face became more radiant. In addition, in my opinion, you are correct. In my opinion, it is necessary to implement some modifications. In an enthusiastic manner, Michael leaned forward. Just what types of modifications? Well, I have been conducting research on Sunset Manor. Where was the location you referenced? I placed a call to them this morning. Mom, that is truly amazing. There, I believe you will find it to be quite enjoyable. They have an opening, but it must be filled promptly. Somebody else is interested in the same unit. How rapidly? Next week. The entrance fee must be paid by Friday in order to guarantee its receipt. Michael's enthusiasm was tangible. That is not an issue, is it? From the sale, you have the funds. Of course I do. It is simply, this is a significant development. I assumed that you and Jessica might be able to assist me with the documentation. Make certain that I am making the appropriate decision. Of course, we are more than willing to provide assistance. My son's visage was committed to memory as I smiled at him. That expectant expression would undergo a significant transformation within a few days. The sole addition I made was nonchalant. All occupants must have a power of attorney on file at the facility. An individual who is capable of making decisions in the event that they are unable to do so. I had hoped that you would be amenable to accepting that responsibility. Of sure, Mother. Any requirement you may have? It is perfect. It was Michael's belief that he was manipulating me into granting him control over my finances. He was, in fact, strolling directly into my snare. Patricia provided her report via telephone on Thursday morning. As she discussed the financial circumstances of Michael and Jessica, I was increasingly astounded. I had underestimated the severity of the situation. They are fully leveraged, Patricia stated. 3 times, the residence has been refinanced. These individuals possess 2 mortgages and a home equity line of credit that is currently at its maximum capacity. Credit card debt that exceeds $80,000. Payments have been made in what manner? Barely. The business of Michael has been operating at a loss for the past 2 years. Utilizing credit cards to settle obligations with other credit cards has been their practice. Financial desperation's basic indicators. Are there any additional questions? Jessica obtained a life insurance policy for you around 6 months ago. $500,000. She is designated as the beneficiary. The temperature of my blood reached a freezing point. How can that be considered legal? Her claim of insurable interest was based on her role as your daughter-in-law and caregiver. Most likely, the insurance company believed that Michael was the true beneficiary and that Jessica was merely managing the documentation. A life insurance policy. I was the subject of their assassination plan for months, not days. However, there is one additional item. My name is Sarah. A geriatric psychiatrist named Dr. Richard Steinberg has been receiving regular payments from Michael. To what end? However, I am uncertain at this time. However, the installments were initiated 3 months ago. Small sums, such as consultation fees. Martin Steinberg. To inquire about him, I wrote a note to David. That afternoon, Michael and Jessica arrived at my residence with a briefcase containing Sunset Manor's documentation. Like generals strategizing for a conflict, they dispersed the documents across my dining room table. Pointing to a dense stack of documents, Jessica clarified that this is the admission contract. In addition, this is the financial disclosure form. It provides a comprehensive inventory of your assets in order to determine your monthly fees. The documents were scanned, and I noted that they are extremely comprehensive. They would solicit access to all of my investments, accounts, and everything else. The power of attorney paperwork is here, Michael added, sliding another document toward me. That is fairly typical. It simply grants me the authority to manage your financial affairs in the event that you are unable to do so. It was with great attention that I reviewed the power of attorney document. The extent of its coverage exceeded Michael's assessment. By signing this document, he would have immediate access to my bank accounts, investment portfolios, and the power to make any financial decisions on my behalf. This appears to be quite extensive, I stated. Is it necessary for me to grant you this level of authority? Mom, it is merely a precaution, Michael informed her. It is necessary for the facility. And to be frank, it is beneficial to have someone younger manage the intricate financial matters at your age. There was that phrase once more at my age. What if I change my mind about Sunset Manor? The inquiry was made by me. Could this be revoked? Quickly, Michael and Jessica exchanged glances. In a technical sense, Jessica said, yes. Nevertheless, the facility has stringent policies regarding residents who attempt to move out. In addition to waiting periods, there are medical evaluations. It is difficult to comprehend. Of course it was. If I were to sign these documents and relocate to Sunset Manor, they would have the power to manage my finances and could make it exceedingly challenging for me to depart, particularly if Dr. Richard Steinberg was present to assess my mental capacity. I gathered the documents and said, I need to think about this overnight. Making this decision is significant. Michael's countenance plummeted. Mother, please be advised that we must submit all necessary materials by tomorrow in order to have the unit. Certainly. In the morning, I will provide you with a response. I reached out to David Hartwell after they had departed. David, what information can you provide me with regarding Dr. Richard Steinberg? Who is Steinberg? A geriatric psychiatrist. He is a specialist in the evaluation of elderly patients' competencies. As to why, he has been receiving compensation from my son for consultations. A prolonged pause ensued. Dear Sarah, Steinberg is known for his willingness to accommodate families who are apprehensive about the judgment of an elderly relative. His assessments are inclined to advocate for the family's desired outcome. What do you mean by he is willing to proclaim individuals incompetent for financial gain? I could not make that statement in an official capacity, but I have observed numerous instances in which families utilize Steinberg's evaluations to seize control of an elderly individual's assets. The picture was intensifying in clarity. However, Michael and Jessica were not solely motivated by my financial gain. A thorough strategy had been devised to retrieve it. Obtain my admission to Sunset Manor under the pretense of safety and care. Please utilize the power of attorney to gain access to my accounts. If I attempted to flee or attempted to resist, have Dr. Steinberg declare me mentally incompetent. It was, in fact, quite ingenious. Had I not observed Jessica contaminate the champagne, I may have fallen victim to their ruse. David, I require you to prepare something for me, I stated. Additionally, it must be completed by the morning of tomorrow. What type of item is it? The kind that will impart a lesson to my family that they will never forget. That evening, I remained in my study, reviewing the plan once more. Everything had to be flawless. Exactly what Michael and Jessica deserved would be awarded to them tomorrow. However, I would need to make one more phone call before I could proceed. The weather on Friday morning was gray and misting, which was precisely the kind of weather that lent an ominous air to my plans. Both Michael and Jessica arrived promptly at 9, dressed as if they were attending a business meeting, which, in a sense, they were. My mother, have you made a decision? The question was posed by Michael, who settled into my living room with scarcely contained excitement. Indeed, I have. I extracted the Sunset Manor documentation, which has been signed and notarized. In my opinion, you are correct. It is now time for me to commence this new chapter. It was evident that Jessica was relieved. Oh, Sarah, I am overjoyed. You are going to adore it there. Yes, I am certain that I will. What about Michael? The power of attorney papers have been signed by me as well. As Michael retrieved the documents, his hands were visibly trembling. This is the correct choice, Mother. I assure you that you will not be disappointed. I directed my gaze toward him. No, I am certain that I will not. Over the course of the subsequent hour, we reviewed the financial documentation. Jessica was typing feverishly on a laptop as I provided account numbers and access credentials. Every few minutes, she would exchange a poignant expression with Michael, as if she were a child who was astonished that Christmas had arrived early. There is one final item, I stated after we had concluded. The transfer will be considered formal once I have signed a few supplementary documents with my attorney. A discussion regarding the tax implications of substantial financial transactions. Of sure, Michael stated. Are you interested in having us transport you to his office? Indeed, he is in the process of arriving here. David was expected to arrive at any moment. Conveniently, the doorbell tolled. However, David Hartwell was not the individual who was standing on my veranda. In addition to a colleague whom I did not recognize, it was Detective Lisa Morrison from the local police department. Dear Mrs. Wilson, I am Detective Morrison. It is imperative that we communicate with you regarding an incident that transpired at your residence earlier this week. Quickly, Michael rose from his seat. Kind of incident? Detective Morrison stated that she suspected of poisoning, her eyes alternating between Jessica and Michael. Our understanding is that there was a medical emergency at the party. Jessica's visage had grown exceedingly pallid. That was my mother. There was an adverse reaction to her medication. It was not a severe condition, according to the physician. Actually, Mrs. Wilson, that is not the information that the hospital reported. A notebook was extracted by Detective Morrison. The toxicology results indicate that your mother consumed a sufficiently high concentration of oleander extract. No, that is not a medication. This poison is lethal. My living room was deafeningly silent. We also conducted a test on the residual champagne from that evening, the detective continued. There was identical oleander extract in the vial that was opened for the occasion. There was a deliberate poisoning of the champagne. An expression of dawning dread was on Michael's face as he gazed at Jessica. Is there anything you did, Jess? I accomplished nothing. In a state of distress, Jessica's voice was strident. I find this to be absurd. For what reason would I intentionally poison my own mother? Detective Morrison stated that this is the primary objective of our investigation, particularly in light of the fact that the champagne goblet which contained the maximum concentration of poison was originally intended for Mrs. Wilson. Jessica seemed to be on the brink of fainting. The ashen complexion of Michael's face caused him to recline in his chair. Quite discreetly, I added, "There is another matter. Detective, proceed to exhibit the insurance policy." With a nod, Detective Morrison extracted an additional document. Mrs. Hartwell, we have learned that you entered into a $500,000 life insurance policy on Mrs. Wilson 6 months ago. This provides you a distinct financial motivation for murder. This is ridiculous. Jessica murmured. Sarah, inform them that this is preposterous. The woman who had feigned to care about me while planning my demise, my daughter-in-law, was the object of my gaze. You were observed placing the poison in my champagne goblet, Jessica. I deliberately swapped our beverages. Michael's cranium abruptly jolted upward. Did you know? You were aware that she was attempting to poison you? I have known for days. In addition, I am aware of your financial circumstances, Dr. Steinberg, and your intention to declare me incompetent. I possess an extensive knowledge of all subjects. The power of attorney papers slid from Michael's numb fingertips. No, Mother, I was unaware of the toxins. No, I vow to God, I was unaware that she intended to attempt to murder you. However, you were indeed aware of the remaining information, were you not? Nursing homes, powers of attorney, and schemes to extract my funds. There was sufficient response in Michael's silence. The detective, Morrison, advanced. Jessica Hartwell, you are currently being held on suspicion of attempted murder. As they handcuffed Jessica, she turned to me with eyes that were filled with fury. You regard yourself as exceedingly intelligent, don't you? Unfortunately, you are unaware of your actions. Actually, I stated that I am aware of the precise actions I have taken. After Jessica was taken away by the police, Michael remained in my living room, appearing to be in a state of disbelief. He gazed at the dispersed power of attorney papers on the floor, occasionally dragging his hands through his hair. She stated that the sole objective was to transport you to a secure location, he ultimately stated. She asserted that you were commencing to exhibit forgetfulness and making detrimental decisions. She convinced me that you are in need of protection. And the money? The subject of that was also protection, correct? Michael's expression was a state of distress. Mom, we are in an immense amount of debt. The organization is experiencing failure. We are behind on all matters. If you were to pass away naturally, Jessica stated that we would receive sufficient funds to commence anew. However, she did not express any words regarding homicide, and he gestured helplessly. It was my belief that we were simply preparing for the inevitable, ensuring that we had everything in position for the time when you, or I, passed away due to natural causes. How fortuitous that those natural causes required a little assistance in their arrival. While gazing at me, Michael's eyes were filled with weeping. Sincerely, I apologize. I am extremely apologetic. Dear Mother, I have never intended to cause you harm. I engaged in a close examination of my son's countenance, seeking the truth that lay beneath the contrition. There was a part of me that wanted to believe him, and I wanted to believe that Jessica had manipulated him into this situation. However, it was too late for me to disregard warning signs, as I had been in business for an extended period. Show me your phone, Michael. What? Your telephone. Show me the text messages you exchanged with Jessica over the past week. When Michael hesitated, he reluctantly relinquished his phone. I scanned through his messages, my heart plummeting with each exchange I read. My name is Jessica. Did you discuss Sunset Manor with your mother? My name is Michael. Certainly, yes. It is under consideration by her. My name is Jessica. All right. The sooner we manage to relocate her, the better. Our finances have been the subject of an excessive number of inquiries from her. My name is Michael. Could she reconsider her decision? My name is Jessica. No, she will not. Not after tomorrow night. My name is Michael. How about tomorrow evening? My name is Jessica. Please have faith in me. She will be desperately pleading with us to provide her with care by Sunday. The phone was returned to Michael by me. The information was known to you, didn't you? Perhaps the specific technique is not necessary. However, it was evident that Jessica had a plan for the evening of the celebration. The shoulders of Michael were sagging. She was attempting to intimidate you in some way, I believed. I suggest staging a break-in or a tragedy that would serve as a wake-up call that you were not secure living alone. Is it your belief that she intended to orchestrate my attempted murder? Do not commit homicide. This is merely an effort to persuade you to relocate to Sunset Manor voluntarily. His casual manner of expressing it effectively chilled me to the core. The concept of subjecting me to trauma in order to induce my compliance was one that my own son had expressed contentment with. My name is Michael. There is an additional matter that you should be aware of, I stated. I engaged a private investigator to investigate your financial affairs. Whiteness enveloped his countenance. What you have discovered? Every single thing. The fact that you have been living beyond your means for years, the debt, and the doomed business. I withdrew Patricia's report. I was, however, particularly intrigued by one particular aspect, the disbursements to Dr. Steinberg. My mother, I am capable of providing an explanation. Are you able to? It is because of this that you have been compensating him for consulting on my behalf for the past 3 months, long before you proposed Sunset Manor, before you expressed any apprehension regarding my mental health. Michael, could you expand on the specific subject matter of your consultation with him? Michael submerged his face in his palms. We required a contingency strategy, according to Jessica, for the event that you declined to execute the power of attorney voluntarily. Plan B. Mr. Steinberg consented to assess you and identify any indications of dementia or incompetence. As Jessica stated, it was merely a precautionary measure in the event that you became difficult. A chilling sensation settled in my chest. This was your intention from the outset, to designate me mentally incompetent. Use only when absolutely necessary. That is, only if you denied us the opportunity to assist you. What can you do to assist me, Michael? Could you assist me in transmitting my funds? There was an air of truth that hovered between us. My son, the child I had nurtured, cherished, and dedicated my life to, had been devising a scheme to undermine my autonomy and take the fruits of my labor. There is one more thing, I said quietly. The documents that you signed today. What is the power of attorney that I granted you? Michael gazed upward with optimism. Yes? Fake. David had them prepared specifically for this meeting. They allow you to exercise power of attorney over a bank account that contains precisely $1. Michael directed his gaze toward me in astonishment. What? My actual funds are safeguarded in trusts that are beyond your reach. What is the will that you are so concerned about? Leaves you with a modest annual income and nothing more. Even that is rendered obsolete if you are found guilty of conspiracy in Jessica's assassination plot. Michael's expression was a state of distress. You have resulted in the complete destruction of my existence. The answer is no, Michael. Your own existence was devastated by you. I simply ensured that you were unable to wreck mine during the entire procedure. I suddenly experienced an unexpected emotion as I observed my son sitting in a state of devastation. No gratification, not a substitute for vindication. It was a profound, bone-wearying sorrow for the man he had chosen to become. I sat in my garden 3 months later, contemplating the meanings of beginnings and endings as I observed the roses blossom. Jessica had been sentenced to 15 years in prison for attempted homicide. While his attorney was able to mitigate the original allegations, Michael was sentenced to 3 years in prison for conspiracy. A call had been received from Emma, my granddaughter, the previous evening. At 16, she was of an age to comprehend her parents' actions and to be appalled by their decisions. I am so remorseful, Grandma Sarah, she said, her voice choked with weeping. No, I was unaware that they were organizing any of this. I understand, my dear. You are to blame for none of this. May I travel to visit you this summer? I understand that Mom and Dad are elsewhere, but I would appreciate the opportunity to see you. That is something I would greatly appreciate. She had been informed, and I intended it to be taken seriously. In all of this, Emma was blameless. Just as I was, she was a victim of her parents' avarice. As an unexpected ally, Helen Peterson had emerged. We have been meeting for coffee twice a week for the past few weeks. 2 women who have formed a bond as a result of the odd experience of surviving the betrayal of their own family. She had expressed interest in composing a book on elder abuse, employing our narrative as a cautionary tale. In our most recent coffee date, Helen mentioned that I am perpetually reminded of the near call they came to escaping with it. They were never given the opportunity, I replied. For 4 decades, I have been involved with individuals who sought my money. There was only one distinction this time. They shared my DNA. Helen chuckled. Does it ever occur to you that you may have regretted the outcome, while both of them are incarcerated? The question was given substantial consideration. Was it a remorse of mine? Michael was the child I had nurtured and cherished, my son. He was also a man who was prepared to demolish my life for money. I regret that it was necessary. I ultimately stated. Yet, I have no remorse for safeguarding my own interests. The doorbell interrupted my garden contemplation. I observed David Hartwell standing on my veranda, holding a briefcase and wearing an unusually delighted expression as I observed him through the security monitor. "Is there a reason for your visit, David?" Sitting down in my living room, he announced that he had received delightful news. Insurance companies have elected not to challenge Jessica's policy on your life. As a result of her conviction for attempting to assassinate you, the policy is being voided, and all premiums paid are being refunded. Well, that is something, I suppose. This is not all. Creditors are confiscating all of Michael's assets in order to satisfy his debts. Included in this is the residence that you assisted them in purchasing. They inquire as to whether you would like to submit an offer. My thoughts turned to the residence of Michael and Jessica, which boasted cathedral ceilings and granite countertops, all those beautiful items that they had so ardently desired. No, I replied. Allow someone else to possess it, someone who can honestly afford it. After nodding, David extracted an additional document. Finally, your trust restructuring has been finalized. You are now guaranteed perpetual protection for your funds. Without your explicit written consent, no one can access it. In addition, the trust will be automatically transferred to a charitable organization in the event that an individual endeavors to declare you incompetent. Thank you, David, for all that you have done. After David departed, I sat on my deck and poured myself a goblet of wine, observing the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink. I had come to understand that money has the ability to evoke both the best and the worst in individuals by the age of 70. Regrettably, it had produced the very worst in my family. Nevertheless, I had acquired additional knowledge. I had underestimated my own degree of strength. Enough intelligence to discern their schemes, strong enough to prevent them. In addition, they are resilient enough to establish a new existence without them. I received an SMS message from Emma on my phone. "Hey, Grandma. I have been accepted to Northwestern University. The same as you suggested, pre-law. I cannot wait to share all of the details with you during my visit," I replied by smiling and typing. "Sweetheart, congratulations. I am truly pleased of you." Indeed, that may have been the genuine triumph. Ensuring that the next generation has the opportunity to make better decisions, rather than preventing Michael and Jessica's scheme. Emma would develop the understanding that money was a necessary instrument, rather than an objective. The sentiment of that family was one of affection and support, rather than avarice and exploitation. In my garden, the roses were in full blossom. Now, I am being attended to by an exceptional landscaping service that I can afford. It was a tranquil atmosphere in the residence, protected by legal documents and security systems that guaranteed my autonomy. At my retirement celebration, I had initiated this narrative by discussing an unsuccessful poisoning endeavor. But, in reality, the subject matter was significantly more significant. Old age and powerlessness are distinct concepts. My age may have been 70, but I was far from helpless. Additionally, someone who attempted to verify that theory would acquire knowledge, as Jessica and Michael did. It would be a costly error to underestimate an elderly woman who is mentally acute. At times, the most effective form of retribution is to simply live a fulfilling life and ensure that the individuals who have harmed you do not reap the rewards of their actions. I had completed both tasks, and I would be confident in my ability to remain asleep. After all, at my age, a decent night's sleep is more valuable than all the money in the world. My possession of both was merely an added benefit. The voice is important.